Welcome back to the Deal Vault podcast. If you're a real estate investor looking to scale, secure funding, and learn from real deals, you're in the right place. I'm Greg, and together with Nate and Sarah, we'll sit down each week and break down market trends, funding strategies, real deal stories from our investors. Now, if you're ready to unlock knowledge, relationships, and capital you need, let's open the vault.
Hey, welcome back to Deal Vault podcast.
That's again.
It's again.
Sorry, you're not sorry.
Okay, so before we jump into today, we have a very important question that we actually ask
The most important question.
all people who apply to become, an account executive here at Loan Bids, and this is, I don't know, pretty topical because we have a lot of folks either in our office or just maybe your neighbors here in Missouri who have chickens in their backyard. But the big question that we have to ask everybody, because I think it says a lot about you as a person, is would you rather fight 100 chickens or one 100-pound chicken?
It's very serious.
So, Sarah, I don't know that we've ever gotten your answer on this.
Okay, so
So for context, you own chickens. We own
True,
chickens.
but
You don't interact with them very much.
fair, I'm not a farm girl, a nature girl, whatever. I do not like birds, and I don't really like to interact with the chickens. So I would go actually with probably the 100 chickens because I can kick them. Because
100 of them?
100 of
They're
them.
ferocious, though. I mean, they're
They're
fighting you.
But I have been in a situation personally with lots of them, and I like them at a smaller height level. The thought of a massive one, like face to face, that is terrifying. So I'm one of those. And maybe that's the ops answer. Maybe we want the ops people to kick 100 chickens around versus one big chicken.
I could actually buy that.
Yeah.
The ops
Ops
folks,
people may want the 100 chickens.
they're like, you know what? Give me 100
Take
chickens.
advantage of 100 little things. Kick 'em around.
Exactly.
I don't know. That's my answer.
Well, the appropriate sales answer or the appropriate account executive answer is what, Greg?
100-pound chicken.
100-pound
Knock
chicken.
that sucker out.
Let's just get this thing over with, and let's just take on the big chicken.
Take on the big chicken. You only have one beak and a couple feet to deal with, and you just wrangle that sucker and take care of it. I'm telling you, one mean rooster is like, they're nuts. 100 mean roosters?
Well,
Are you kidding me?
if we're talking roosters, I might change my answer.
Well, they're angry chickens. It doesn't really matter. But
Okay.
I mean, those hens, the pecking order is serious stuff.
Very serious, thought-provoking, question for investors today.
Yes. So
Yeah.
think about
What
that
are you?
for all of you that are listening.
Yep.
It will guide your life if you can understand your answer to that
Yeah.
question.
100%. Cool.
But
Well, then let's transition to our actual topic for today, which is talking about why even consider using a rehab loan. So
Yeah.
that's a little bit more important than
Aren't they just to take interest money from the investor and take all the profits?
it's just
That's
a
what they are, right?
12% interest payment, and it's for eternity.
And they provide no other value to the investor, right?
Right. False.
False. Tell me more, Nate.
Yeah.
Why would I, as an investor, want to consider using a rehab loan if, let's just like paint the environment. Let's say I did have enough money to buy the property and had enough money to rehab it, like $100,000 property and it needs 30 in rehab. I've got $140,000 laying around. Good for me. Why on earth would I consider using a rehab loan when I could just fund it on my own? In that scenario, or even a different scenario?
Sure. I run into this a lot where, somebody does have the cash to do so. And I actually, I'm very upfront and say, I think the most cost-effective way for you to do this is, there's three options. One, to do it with your own cash. Two, to use a local hard money lender who is probably lending out of their, retirement account or something like that, potentially, or just somebody who does this professionally, but locally, and they want to be really competitive, and they're charging you 10% interest and maybe a point or something like that. Maybe even less than that. And so that is typically finding that, sweetheart deal, as I like to call it, is whether it's through a local hard money lender or your local bank, can be a cheaper way to borrow money. And then the third option being, I don't have the cash, or maybe I do, but I definitely don't have a local hard money connection for a rehab loan. what does institutional private money look like? And I would even argue that sometimes it is, more cost effective. But in general, what I've heard, from folks on the street is that, cash is king first as far as the cheapest way to do it. Then maybe a local guy or your uncle who's, willing to lend some money, and then you're just going to pay him, a reasonable fee for that. And then third being turning to, institutional private lending for a rehab loan, which is what we deal in. And so the thing that I tell folks is, if doing it as, cheaply and cost effective is the best, is most important to you, then you should use your own money. If having a little bit of a sense of security by not bolting all of your cash to the walls of the house is something that you're interested in, learning more about, like, let's talk about some of the cons there, then I think a rehab loan is worth considering, and something that I hear from a lot of folks that maybe isn't, I've got all the cash to purchase and rehab this property, is I just need you to finance 80 or 90% of this purchase for me, and then I'll go ahead and give me a 12-month bridge loan on that. But I don't need to borrow the rehab funds. I've got the cash to rehab this property.
Right.
And so the thing that I counter with is, if you're planning on, using all your own cash for that, or you're planning on swinging the hammer yourself, I only need $10,000. That's how much everything at Home Depot is going to cost me. Call back to our last episode. And that's how much everything's going to cost me in materials, is 10 grand. But the value of the work that I'm going to complete is
25.
or $30,000, because everyone who is going to be installing all those materials would need to get paid for that. You're just planning on doing it yourself. What if you close on this property, and I always use a very extreme example of, and you get in a car accident on your way home, but from the title company, but something during your project alters where you need to dedicate funds, then having that rehab budget handy is really helpful. Or, I mean, let's take a more optimistic view. What if you run into another deal that 10% down on this house is, no skin off your back, but then you take the other $50,000 that you had in the bank and you use it to rehab this entire house, and maybe run up your credit cards a little bit. The credit score gets lower, so you can't refi out right now. But also, then there's another deal that's hanging out there that if you'd recycled $10,000 5 times over for that $50K rehab, instead of just putting all $50K into it, you might have had a second house.
Yeah, I think I like that. I mean, obviously the first one is something that can happen, but I think that the opportunity for more projects and the multiplication of your funds, right? Instead of tying it all up in the house and being stuck there, it just creates more pressure around that one project too. Like, if that one doesn't get done, if one thing comes up, then all of your business is, strapped to that. And so I think, again, just making sure that you're seeing it as an opportunity to be able to leverage the cash that you do have in other projects. And that, I feel like, reduces stress. With the rehab deals, I think, especially experienced investors are like, well, I know I move quickly, and I think looking at where these rehab loans were 10 years ago and where even the institutional rehab loans are today and what we're seeing, right? I think they've become more similar to their local investors, right? And the local guy who's lending his own money, as far as the speed in which these lenders can transact on these closings, right? Because of AI tools and valuation tools, they're able to get to know the local markets pretty well, so that they can confidently do hybrid valuations, close quickly. There's also a lot of tech out there now that helps with quick draws. So I think the speed and convenience that local investors, connecting with a local hard money agent, were benefiting from. Like, some of these institutional capital providers are going to be able to do the same speed, but they also aren't going to be tied down to, I've used all of my money, I don't have more for you. And so building those relationships now, I feel like, even in the time that I've been in the industry, it's more investor friendly. And that's what our partners are constantly asking. How can we do this faster and more efficiently? Because I think what we've seen and told them is speed is everything for real, like rehab investors, right? Because if they're good at it, they can execute it quickly. So yeah, I think having the understanding, if you've tried it and it's been a few years, to try again, because what I've seen just personally is that it has sped up a lot and it looks closer to, I think, what that mom and pop local hard money guy would do for you,
Yeah.
but just more
The
opportunity.
the rehab lenders have, by and large, figured out a lot of those things
Yeah.
that it must be this if anybody's really gonna find value in it. So
Mm.
here's how I look at this and how I would communicate to borrowers when I was working directly with borrowers is all cash versus, using a rehab loan. A rehab loan, given that it has an interest rate, is more expensive than doing all cash. Maybe. Um, if you have way more cash than is necessary to buy the property and rehab it, you can consider doing it cash. You don't answer to anybody. Pretty nice. You just do what you want. Whereas if you have a rehab loan, you got to do draws and you have to do what you agreed upon.
Yeah.
That they advance all of the money to buy the property and fund it. Like you do answer to someone. Cash, just do whatever you want. Um, but if you have just enough cash, that's a really scary scenario. And here's how that plays out. Even if you have just enough cash, the rehab loan, like there's always that one thing in the property that is a little bit more expensive. And now that just enough cash is not enough cash. And now you got to do a refi rehab, and those are always really messy deals. That's like a pretty bad scenario.
Sure.
But let's just say like the normal scenario where you have just enough cash. Everybody's shoving these through cards to get points, right? You carry the balance. And when you do a rehab construction draw, you pay off that card. The cash person puts it on the card and pays it off. But towards the end, when they're kind of running out of their just enough cash, and then there was a little thing that came up that made it a little bit more expensive, and now I'm going to just let that sit in my card just a little bit longer than I typically would have if I had a lot of extra cash. Your FICO score goes down, and you want to go refinance that property. You're in a scenario where your FICO's down, and you're going to refinance into your 30-year debt. What happens when your FICO is lower and you go do a 30-year loan, Nate?
Your interest rate goes up.
Interest rate goes up and potentially your leverage goes down.
For sure.
And your whole investing scenario has totally changed. So by saving interest on your rehab loan, you are paying a lot more in interest over 30 years
Right.
versus a lot of these, a good rehabber's holding that rehab loan for 6 months, right? How important is the interest rate on that loan? Way less important than preserving your FICO to get the best interest rate for the 30-year loan that you're going to cash flow on. So it's another scenario where people may be stepping over dollars to save pennies. That comes up a lot. And it's not even that they're dumb people. It's just, you just are not considering the other side of the coin as, yes, you are going to pay a little money to get money, but it can put you in a position where you have the better FICO. And if there is a cost overrun, I still have a ton of money left in my pocket. I can just cover it stress-free, go do my refinance with Nate, and he's going to be able to get me the higher leverage with a better interest rate. Whew, made it out of that tricky scenario in a really good way versus I'm in a tough spot. My FICO's not great and I'm basically out of cash.
Yeah.
That person comes to us, right? It comes to you all the time.
All the time.
And
We're
we
talking
give them
to those folks all the time.
and that's unfortunate because a lot of times in that scenario, if they just would have used the rehab loan, they don't get into that really tough situation that we can get you out of. But man, we can get you out of it in a really great way. Just use a rehab loan. Yes, you're going to have some points on that rehab loan. There's going to be an interest rate associated with that. But when we do the 30-year debt, you're in a great position versus coming to us when you're backed into a corner, you have limited options. Well, we're still going to help you, right? Like it's just going to be maybe a trickier situation. So I just want to like put that perspective out there that I've shared with investors for a lot of years now, that have only done cash because I don't want to pay interest to the man. I get that. I don't like to pay interest to the man either. I'm an investor, right? But if you take the full perspective of like, there is a cost of capital, especially if you're going to hold these properties for 30 years, you're going to have an interest rate on your 30-year debt. Is there a scenario where you're creating an environment where you're going to pay a higher interest rate or with a lower loan amount, so you're less well leveraged for your overall portfolio because you're saving interest on your rehab loan? I think in a ton of scenarios that's happening, and those people aren't considering it because cash is king at the end of the day. You answer to nobody and you just do whatever you want and you're not paying that interest rate. I get it. But if you look further, there's a bigger picture that hopefully by us just talking about this, somebody is like, oh yeah, I've been in that situation and maybe I don't have to go there. Or I was just going to do cash because I don't want to pay interest rate to the man. And now that I consider that, I see that I can have a lending partner that actually is looking at the full picture here.
Yeah.
And these two products, the rehab loan and the 30-year debt, actually match and fit nicely together and work together to get you to the end game of having a rehab property that cash flows for the next however many
Sure.
years.
For sure.
I think I think the most reliable, or sorry, the highest volume, BRRRR investors that I work with are all using rehab loans just for the reliability and repeatability of it.
Well, and again, like just I think, stepping into those conversations again, like when I think about the borrowers that come to us under the most stress and pressure, and I mean that's if you're doing real estate, most likely you got into it because you wanted to alleviate stress and pressure in a W-2 job or some way else. Like you want it to feel easier. You don't want it to feel harder. And just looking at how can I create margin so that I'm not putting myself in an extra stress situation. I mean, real estate, it's unpredictable sometimes, right? Markets change. But if you can use this and understand why it helps you, then it's actually there to support you with the transition to a refinance or the sale of the property to create that margin for you and give you the opportunity, like you're saying at the beginning, Nate, to be able to just do more faster. So I think it's important that you're not just thinking about the rates and the fees, but how is this actually going to help me with this project? Do more, have more capacity to not think about this all the time and be set up better long term. And that is something that we have insight on because we interact with it every day that not everybody does. So I think if you're an investor and you haven't tried a rehab loan and you're feeling the weight of that stress, or you haven't tried one in a while, like come back again, give it a shot. Because, like I said, if you are organized, you've got your experience broken out, you've got a clear scope of work, which we can help support on, making that extra clear and keeping moving faster. Like our lenders and institutional are trying to function like a local investor or local hard money lender. They're wanting to be fast for you now too. And so, if you're feeling the stress, feeling the weight, like just give it a shot and see if it helps create that margin, just stress tolerance, and gives you a long-term outcome that's more supported. I think that's really the why.
Yeah.
Like, give
And I
it
think
again.
first step to doing that is, reaching out. So that way we can just take a look at a deal with you. So I absolutely love reviewing deals with investors. And so I have a ton of fun with that every day. And just talking about different scenarios, even if it's just something somebody found on Zillow, is always a lot of fun to just talk about the different options that are out there. It doesn't have to be something they're
We didn't say too is if you are an investor and maybe you have some experience flipping, but not a lot, just going through the rehab process is going to work through the project and make sure that you've thought of everything. If an underwriter is looking at the math, the local values, like the opportunity for really reviewing that's actually super supportive. Like there have been times where we've had valuations come in on rehab loans that just doesn't support the budget. And if you don't have anybody looking at it and you're just using your own cash, like you're going to miss something. And that in itself is like actually a value add. Like you could think of the underwriting process as a burden, or you could actually think of it as supporting your project. What if there's something that's shifted in your market or something that you don't know? Like if the underwriter is hesitant, maybe you should be too. And you're missing that by not doing the rehab loan. So I think that's important to consider too.
This lending team who's done 10,000 feasibility studies.
Yeah.
Maybe they've got some insight into what this project should look like.
A lender can be a partner or they can be an enemy. It depends really on just what perspective you want to bring to the table. But I think if you look at a lender and all that they bring to the table, maybe through a broker, that's what we do. But at the end of the day, you're bringing somebody that's really great at underwriting risk, that you certainly should be aware of as well. And so a lender can be a great partner in that way, or you could have the perspective of they're the enemy. A lot of that's just up to you. I always look at it as a partner. Partners don't always get it right. There are occasions where we push back on an underwriter, but they're in a supportive way. So
For
yeah,
sure.
hopefully this, I think, provides a lot of good perspective on rehab loans. Are they just taking my money? Do they provide any value? Hopefully it just gives a new perspective to maybe that person that was doing all cash.
We're thinking about it anyways.
Yeah, exactly.
And
So
to be fair, if you are that person that's hair's on fire, it feels like a dumpster fire, like we said, help those people too. If you're in that pickle right now, like we can help you figure out how to get out of it with different loan products too. So we're here to support
yeah, all scenarios.
all
So-
scenarios.
Cool. Good conversation, guys.
thanks for listening to the Deal Vault. If you found value in today's episode, be sure to subscribe and share with another investor and leave us a review. If you're looking for help funding your next deal, you can always holler at us at loanbids.com. We'd love to help you on that deal. Until next time, keep building, keep investing.